In the early 20th century, as Kenya grappled with the harsh realities of colonial rule, a new breed of labor leaders emerged, determined to fight for the rights of the working class. Among them were trailblazers like Clement Lubembe, Mokan Singh, Chemanyi Washington Githae, Harry Thuku, Lawrence Nginy, Fred Kubai, and Tom Mboya. Clement Lubembe, a railway worker, witnessed firsthand the exploitation and discrimination faced by African laborers. His fiery speeches and unwavering commitment to the cause inspired thousands of workers to join the struggle for better wages, working conditions, and an end to racial segregation. Mokan Singh, an Indian immigrant, became a champion of workers' rights, transcending racial boundaries. He organized strikes and protests, demanding equal treatment and fair labor practices for all workers, regardless of their ethnic or racial background. Chemanyi Washington Githae, a fearless and charismatic leader, rose from the ranks of the dock workers in Mombasa. His fiery oratory and unwavering commitment to the cause of the working class made him a thorn in the side of the colonial authorities. In the early 1920s, he played a key role in organizing the first African Railway Workers' Union, mobilizing workers to fight for better wages and working conditions. He organized strikes and protests, demanding better working conditions and an end to the exploitation of Kenyan workers. Harry Thuku was another charismatic labor leader who rose to prominence in the 1920s. He helped organize a massive strike by African workers in Nairobi in 1921, demanding better wages and an end to racial discrimination. The strike was met with harsh repression by the colonial government, and Thuku was eventually deported. Together, these pioneers paved the way for the formation of Kenya's first labor unions, such as the Labour Trade Union of Kenya, LTUK, and the Kenya Federation of Labour, KFL. Their tireless efforts laid the foundation for a movement that would reshape the nation's labour landscape. As the winds of change swept across Africa, the labour movement in Kenya gained momentum, becoming an integral part of the broader struggle for independence. Fred Kubai is another prominent leader who emerged in the 1940s. Kubai was a vocal critic of colonial labour practices and a strong advocate for workers' rights. He became the president of the Kenya Federation of Labour, KFL, in 1952, a powerful trade union body. Leaders like Tom Mboya and Dennis Akumu emerged, using their positions within the trade unions to mobilize the masses and challenge the colonial authorities. Despite facing brutal crackdowns, arrests, and intimidation, these labor leaders remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice and equality. Their sacrifices and unwavering determination inspired generations of Kenyans to continue the fight for workers' rights, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As Kenya celebrated its hard-won independence in 1963, the labor movement found itself at a crossroads. The euphoria of freedom was tinged with uncertainty as the new government grappled with the challenges of nation-building and economic development. In the early years after independence, leaders like Dennis Akumu and Arthur Oshwada took the helm of the trade union movement. The Central Organization of Trade Unions (COTU) was formed and became the dominant trade union organization in Kenya. They focused on securing better wages, improving working conditions, and safeguarding the rights of workers in the face of a rapidly changing economic landscape. However, the spirit of unity that had fueled the struggle for independence began to wane, and political interference in the labor movement became increasingly common. The government, wary of the power of organized labor, sought to co-opt and control the trade unions, leading to a period of internal strife and fragmentation. The 1980s and 1990s witnessed a resurgence of labor activism, as Kenya's workers grew increasingly frustrated with the deteriorating economic conditions and the erosion of their rights. Mass strikes and protests erupted across the country, led by a new generation of labor leaders who refused to be silenced. The return of multi-party politics in the 1990s led to the emergence of rival trade union federations alongside Co2. It was during this tumultuous time that figures like Francis Atwoli, the current COTU's Secretary General, and Clement Iongo emerged as voices of defiance, challenging the government's attempts to undermine the independence of the labor movement. Atwoli, a firebrand and charismatic leader, rose through the ranks of the Dock Workers Union, rallying workers against oppressive policies and demanding transparency and accountability. It was a period of struggle, sacrifice, and perseverance as the labor movement fought to reclaim its rightful place in the nation's political and economic discourse, setting the stage for a new era of workers' empowerment and advocacy. As Kenya ushered in the 21st century, the labor movement found itself at a critical juncture, navigating the complexities of a globalized economy and a rapidly changing political landscape. Francis Atwoli, who had emerged as a formidable force in the previous decades, solidified his position as a preeminent voice of organized labor in Kenya. His unwavering determination and tireless advocacy for workers' rights earned him respect both at home and on the international stage. Under Atwoli's leadership, the Central Organization of Trade Unions (COTU) became a powerful force, challenging government policies deemed detrimental to workers' interests and pushing for comprehensive labor reforms. His ability to mobilize masses of workers and forge strategic alliances with civil society organizations made him a force to be reckoned with. However, the labor movement faced new challenges as the country grappled with issues such as privatization, outsourcing, and the growing influence of multinational corporations. Leaders like Benson Okwaro and Rajibu Mwandu emerged, championing the rights of workers in the private sector and advocating for fair labor practices in the face of globalization. The 21st century also witnessed a rise in activism among informal sector workers, such as street vendors, domestic workers, and small-scale traders. Leaders like Adia Wachira and Jacqueline Mugo gave voice to these often marginalized groups, demanding recognition, protection, and inclusion in the broader labor movement. As Kenya continues to navigate the challenges of economic development and social progress, the labor movement remains a vital force, adapting to changing times while holding steadfast to its core principles of workers' rights, fair labor practices, and social justice.